In the red giant stage, the hydrogen in the core is exhausted in about 4 to 5 billion years, as I said. And it's useful to understand that this 4 to 5 billion years is very similar to the current end of Kalpa, which is 2.3 billion years. So it's not identical, but it is similar, right? So I'll leave it at that. I won't get into more detail. And the hydrogen in the core is exhausted and it gets converted into helium. So all the hydrogen becomes helium in the core. And so now the sun can produce energy in 2 ways. The sun in the core can fuse the helium to produce carbon. So helium has an atomic number of 2 and carbon has an atomic number of 4. So 2 helium atoms can produce carbon. And the hydrogen in the shell can join together to form helium. Right? So these are and both these things can release a lot of energy. And as a result of this, the sun grows enormously in size and it becomes what is called a red giant. So an example of the red giant in our nakshatra system is the star Rohini. The star Rohini is a red giant. And the word Rohinika in Sanskrit means woman with a red face. So the name, the red is also already in the name Rohini. And if you look at the descriptions in the Puranas, Rohini is one of the daughters of Daksha. And he always talks, and the Puranas talk about Rohini as the chief among the daughters of Daksha. So it's a very bright star. In fact, it's the brightest star in the constellation. But when the sun grows in size, what happens is that Venus and Mercury get absorbed into the sun. So let me show you. Let's look at this. Can you see the cursor that I'm showing here? Is it visible? It's not visible.
Yes, visible. It is visible.
Okay, wonderful. So you can see the sun here. This is the sun as it is. You have Mercury here. You have Venus here, and you have Earth and Mars. And this is called the habitable zone. And this zone is where it is neither too hot or not too cold. Mercury and Venus are too hot, and Jupiter onwards is too cold. Here you see the sun has become much bigger, right? And Mercury and Venus have disappeared into the sun, right? And the Earth is no longer in the habitable zone. The Earth is very close, and you can see it's practically on fire. And then you have potentially Jupiter and Saturn in the habitable zone of the Earth, right? So I didn't create this. This is well understood today, and this is from a site called phys.org, and I thought it was a very good way to demonstrate, to illustrate what is going on here, right? So, so there's a couple of things that happen, right? The first thing is that the sun keeps producing solar flares, and the sun loses mass due to flaring. So, when every time the sun sends out solar flares, large amount of the mass of the sun gets thrown out into space, and as the mass of the sun gets thrown out into space, the mass decreases, and over 1 billion years, the gravity of the sun decreases. And as the gravity of the sun decreases, the Earth starts going further and further away from the sun, as do all the planets. But when the red giant sun grows in size, and the scientists have actually modeled this, right? The sun, even though the Earth is now further away, the sun becomes so large that it comes up right up against close to the sun. And so here is the image that you see on the right is an artist's impression of the Earth close to a red giant sun, right? So the red giant sun grows in size and its surface comes close to the Earth, and the Earth is literally burnt by the sun's heat and the solar flares. So you can see the Earth is burnt black and it's actually glowing in some places, right? It's just an artist who created a painting to demonstrate this. So let's see what the Puranas say about this, right? The Puranas have a specific term for a sun in this stage. Very difficult to believe this. The sun in this stage is called the Samvartakaditya, the sun that destroys the worlds, right? And so it's very clear. When the end of the Kalpa arrives, the sun of 7 rays assumes the form of Samvartakaditya, the sun of final annihilation, and burns down the 3 worlds. So according to the end of the Kalpa is about 2.3 billion years from now, and modern science says this will happen in 5 billion years. So there's a difference in timing, but you can see that it's reasonably close, right? And there is it's hard to believe, but there's a long passage in the Brahmanda Purana, almost 25 verses that describes this thing. It's not just one verse here or something. I'm just going to cite 2 or 3 verses. The Brahmanda Purana mentions this in 2 or 3 verses. The same thing is mentioned in virtually all the Puranas because it is the Pratisarga. The Pratisarga is one of the 5 components of any Purana, which is the destruction. And so every Purana has it, but the Brahmanda Purana has it in very good detail. So it's a very good text to take it from. Then it says, so the sun is not completely up to the very close to the sun. It's just growing bigger and getting near the sun, near the earth now. It says, then a continued drought lasting for 100 years takes place. So for 100 years, and it's not clear whether it's 100 years, human years or divine years, right, takes place. On account of it, only those living beings deficient in strength or having very little potentiality on the surface of the earth become dissolved and get mingled with the dust. So they basically die and they become ash, right? So basically they can't survive anymore. Let's see what else it says. Then it says that the sun grows even bigger, the water in the rivers and oceans are turned into vapor and the moisture is sucked out. It says the 7 rays of the sun that blazes in the sky, sucking up water, drink water from the great ocean. Being burned by their brilliant flames, the earth, including mountains, rivers, and ocean, become bereft of moisture and vicinity. So the entire oceans become dry, completely dry. Rivers become dry. So there's absolutely no water left on the earth, right? The mountains collapse because of the sun's heat, because it's so hot. The mountains literally explode because of volcanic pressures and so on. And the Purana says everything mobile and immobile becomes dissolved, and the earth, devoid of trees and even grass, may seem like the back of a tortoise. So, back of a tortoise is smooth, right? There is nothing on it. It does not even have depressions, right? It's just a very, very smooth thing, and so it says it becomes very, very smooth because all the mountains have collapsed into what were then the oceans, and everything becomes almost a circle. And finally, the earth literally glows from the heat of the sun, as shown in this image from earlier. And it says, getting the fiery splendor transmitted to it, the entire universe slowly assumes the form of a huge block of iron and shines thus. It means, so when you take a block of iron and put it in a fire and let it heat up, it starts to glow. And the Purana actually describes this. It says, the fiery splendor transmitted to it, the earth literally shines because of this heat. So it's quite amazing how detailed the description